The story of Atrahasis, the Babylonian story of creation. This audio presentation is read and voiced by Shakim Ra. It is provided to the public by Amun-Ra University. Atrahasis is an 18th century Akkadian epic recorded in various versions on clay tablets, named for its protagonist, Atrahasis, or exceedingly wise. The Atrahasis tablets include both a creation myth and one of 3 surviving Babylonian flood myths. The name Atrahasis also appears as king of Shuruppak in the times before flood on one of the Sumerian king lists. The oldest known copy of the epic tradition concerning Atrahasis can be dated by scribal identification to the reign of Hammurabi's great-grandson, Ami Saduqa, 1646 to 1626 BC. However, various old Babylonian dialect fragments exist, and the epic continued to be copied into the first millennium BC. The story of Atrahasis also exists in a later Assyrian dialect version, first rediscovered in the library of Ashurbanipal, though its translations have been uncertain due to the artifact being in fragmentary condition and containing ambiguous words. Nonetheless, its fragments were first assembled and translated by George Smith as the Chaldean account of Genesis, the hero of which had his name corrected to Atrahasis by Heinrich Zimmern in 1899. In 1965, Wilbur G. Lambert and Alan Millard published many additional texts belonging to the epic, including an old Babylonian copy written circa 1650 BC, which is the most complete recension of the tale to have survived. These new texts greatly increased knowledge of the epic and were the basis for Lambert and Millard's first English translation of the Atrahasis epic in something approaching entirety. A further fragment was recovered in Ugarit. Also significant is the name Alla, which appears in the story. The text gives evidence that Alla was known as a Mesopotamian god thousands of years before the advent of Islam and millennium before the Quran was written. The story of Atrahasis, tablet number 1. When the gods, instead of man, did the work, bore the loads, the gods' load was too great, the work too hard, the trouble too much. The great Annunaki made the Igigi carry the workload 7-fold. Anu, their father, was king, their counselor warrior Elil, their chamberlain was Ninurta, their canal controller Enki. They took the box of lots and then cast the lots. The gods made the division. Anu went up to the sky, and Elil took the earth for his people. The boat which bars the sea was assigned to far-sighted Enki. When Anu had gone up to the sky, and the gods of the Apsu had gone below, the Annunaki of the sky made the Igigi bear the workload. The gods had to dig out canals, had to clear channels, the lifelines of the land. The Igigi had to dig out canals, had to clear channels, the lifelines of the land. The gods dug out the Tigris riverbed and then dug out the Euphrates. In the deep they set up the Apsu of the land inside it, raised its top of all the mountains. They were counting the years of loads. They were counting the years of loads. For 3,600 years they bore the excess. Hard work, night and day, they groaned and blamed each other, grumbled over the masses of excavated soil. Let us confront our chamberlain and get him to relieve us of our hard work. Come, let us carry the Lord, the counselor of the gods, the warrior from his dwelling. Come, let us carry Elil, the counselor of the gods, the warrior from his dwelling. Then Alla made his voice heard and spoke to the gods his brothers. Come, let us carry the counselor of gods, the warrior from his dwelling. Come, let us carry Elil, the counselor of gods, the warrior from his dwelling. Now, cry battle. Let us mix fight with battle. Let us mix fight with battle. The gods listened to his speech, set fire to their tools, put aside their spades for fire, their loads for the fire god. They flared up. When they reached the gate of warrior Elil's dwelling, it was night, the middle watch. The house was surrounded. The god had not realized. It was night, the middle watch. Ekor was surrounded. Elil had not realized. Yet Kakao was attentive and had it closed. He held the lock and watched the gate. Kakao roused Nasku. They listened to the noise of the Ijiji. Then Nasku roused his master, made him get out of bed, saying, My lord, your house is surrounded. A rebel is running around your door. Elil, your house is surrounded. A rebel is running around your door. Elil had weapons brought to his dwelling. Elil made his voice heard and spoke to the vizier Nasku. Nasku, bar your door, take up your weapons, and stand in front of me. Nasku barred his door, took up his weapons, and stood in front of Elil. Nasku made his voice heard and spoke to the warrior Elil. Oh my lord, your face is sallow as tamarisk. Why do you fear your own sons? O Elil, your face is sallow as tamarisk. Why do you fear your own son? Send for Anu to be brought down to you. Have Enki fetched into your presence. He sent for Anu to be brought down to him. Enki was fetched into his presence. Anu, king of the sky, was present. Enki, king of the Apsu, attended. The great Annunaki were present. Elil got up and the case was put. Elil made his voice heard and spoke to the great gods. Is it against me that they have risen? Shall I do battle? What did I see with my own eyes? A rabble was running around my door. Anu made his voice heard and spoke to the warrior Elil. Let Nasku go out and find out the word of the Ijiji who have surrounded your door to command. Elil made his voice heard and spoke to the vizier Nasku. Nasku, open your door, take up your weapons, and stand before me. In the assembly of all the gods, bow, then stand and tell them, your father Anu, your counselor warrior Elil, your chamberlain Ninurta, and your canon controller Anuji have sent me to say, who was in charge of the rabble? Who was in charge of the fighting? Who declared war? Who ran to the door of Elil? Nasku opened his door, took up his weapons, and went before Elil. In the assembly of all the gods, he bowed, then stood and told the message. Your father, Anu, your counselor warrior Elil, your chamberlain Ninurta, and your canal controller Ennugi have sent me to say, who is in charge of the rabble? Who is in charge of the fighting? Who declared war? Who ran to the door of Elil? And then the gods said, every single one of us gods declared war. We have put a stop to the digging. The load is excessive. It is killing us. Our work is too hard. The trouble, too much. Every single one of us gods declared war. We have put a stop to the digging. The load is excessive. It is killing us. Our work is too hard. The trouble, too much. So every single one of us gods has agreed to complain to Elil. When he heard this, Nasku took his weapons, went and returned to Elil, saying, my lord, you sent me to the gods. I went and explained, exactly as you told me, saying, and then the gods said, every single one of us gods has declared war. We have put a stop to the digging. The load is excessive. It is killing us. Our work is too hard. The trouble too much. So every single one of us gods has agreed to complain to Elil. Elil listened to that speech. His tears overflowed. Elil spoke guardedly, addressed the warrior Anu. Noble one, take a decree. With you to the sky, show your strength. While the Annunaki are sitting before you, call up one god and let them cast him for destruction. Anu made his voice heard and spoke to the gods, his brothers. What are we complaining of? Their work was indeed too hard. Their trouble was too much. Every day the earth resounded. The warning signal was loud enough. We kept hearing the noise. Anu made his voice heard and spoke to Nasku, saying, Nasku, open your door and take up your weapons. Bow in the assembly of the great gods, then stand and tell them, your father Anu, your counselor warrior Elil, your chamberlain Ninurta, and your canal controller Ennugi have sent me to say, who is in charge of the rabble? Who will be in charge of battle? Which god started the war? A rabble was running around my door. When Nasku heard this, he took up his weapons, bowed in the assembly of the great gods, then stood and told them, your father Anu, your counselor warrior Elil, your chamberlain Ninurta, and your canal controller Ennugi have sent me to say, who is in charge of the rabble? Who is in charge of the fighting? Which god started the war? A rabble was running around Elil's door. Then Ea made his voice heard and spoke to the gods, his brothers, just like Alla. Why are we blaming them? Their work was too hard. Their trouble was too much. Every day the earth resounded. The warning signal was loud enough. We kept hearing the noise. Belet Ili, the womb goddess, is present. Let her create primeval man, so that he may bear the yoke, the work of Elil. Let man bear the load of the gods. Belet Ili, the womb goddess, is present. Let the womb goddess create offspring, and let man bear the load of the gods. They called up the goddess, asked the midwife of the gods, wise Mami, you are the womb goddess to be the creator of mankind. Create primeval man, that he may bear the yoke. Let him bear the yoke, the work of Elil. Let man bear the load of the gods. Nintu made her voice heard and spoke to the great gods, saying, it is not proper for me to make him. The work is Enki's. He makes everything pure. If he gives me clay, then I will do it. Enki made his voice heard and spoke to the great gods. On the 1st, 7th, and 15th of the month, I shall make a purification. Then one god should be slaughtered, and the gods can be purified by immersion. Ninurta shall mix clay with his flesh and his blood. Then a god and man will be mixed together in clay. Let us hear the drumbeat forever after. Let a ghost come into existence from the god's flesh. Let her proclaim it as his living sign, and let the ghost exist so as not to forget the slain god. They answered, yes, in the assembly. The great Annunaki who assigned the fates. Thus, on the 1st, 7th, and 15th of the month, he made a purification by washing. Elil, who had intelligence, they slaughtered in their assembly. Ninurta mixed clay with his flesh and blood. They heard the drumbeat forever after. A ghost came into existence from a god's flesh, and she, Ninurta, proclaimed it as his living sign. The ghost existed so as not to forget the slain god. After she had mixed that clay, she called up the Annunaki, the great gods, the Igigi, the great gods, spat spittle upon the clay, made her voice heard and spoke to the great gods. I have carried out perfectly the work that you ordered of me. You have slaughtered a god together with his intelligence. I have relieved you of your hard work. I have imposed your load on man. You have bestowed nose on mankind. I have undone the fetter and granted freedom. They listened to this speech of hers and were freed from anxiety and kissed her feet, saying, We used to call you Mami, but now your name shall be Mistress of all the gods. Far-sighted Enki and wise Mami went into the room of fate. The womb goddesses were assembled. He tried the clay in her presence, but she kept reciting an incantation for Enki. Staying in her presence made her recite it. When she had finished her incantation, she pitched off 14 pieces of clay and set 7 pieces on the right, 7 on the left. Between them she put down a mud brick. She made use of a reed, opened it to cut the umbilical cord, called up the wise and knowledgeable womb goddesses, 7 and 7. 7 created males, 7 created females. From the womb goddess is the creator of fate. He created them 2 by 2. Mami made these rules for people. In the house of a woman who is giving birth to mud bricks shall be put down for 7 days. Belet Ili, wise Mami, shall be honored. The midwife shall rejoice in the house of the woman who gives birth. And when the woman gives birth to the baby, the mother of the baby shall sever herself. A man to a girl, her bosom, a beard can be seen on a young man's cheek. In gardens and waysides, a wife and her husband choose each other. The womb goddesses were assembled, and Ninurta was present. They counted the months, called up the 10th month as the term of fates. When the 10th month came, she slipped in a staff and opened the womb. Her face was glad and joyful. She covered her head, performed the midwifery, put on her belt, and said a blessing. She made a drawing in flour and put down a mud brick. I myself created it. My hands made it. The midwife shall rejoice in the house of the Kadistu priestess. Whenever a woman gives birth and the baby's mother severs herself, the mud brick shall be put for 9 days. Ninurta, the womb goddess, shall be honored. She shall call her Mami. She shall praise the womb goddess and lay down the linen cloth. When the bed is laid out in their house, A wife and her husband shall choose each other. Ishtar shall rejoice in the wife-husband relationship in the father-in-law's house. Celebration shall last for 9 days, and they shall call Ishtar Ishara. And on the 15th day, the fixed time of fate, she shall call Ishtar. 600 years, less than 600 passed, and the country became too wide, the people too numerous. The country was as noisy as a bellowing bull. The god grew restless at their racket. Elil had to listen to their noise. He addressed the great gods. The noise of mankind has become too much. I am losing sleep over their racket. Give the order that Surapu disease shall break out. Now, there was one Atrahasis whose ear was open to his god Enki. He would speak with his god, and his god would speak with him. Atrahasis made his voice heard and spoke to his lord. How long will the gods make us suffer? Will they make us suffer illness forever? Enki made his voice heard and spoke to his servant. Call the elders, the senior men. Start an uprising in your own house. Let heralds proclaim. Let them make a loud noise in the land. Do not revere your gods. Do not pray to your goddesses, but search out the door of Namtara. Bring a baked loaf into his presence. May the flour offering reach him. May he be shamed by the presence and wipe away his hand. Atrahasis took the order, gathered the elders to his door. Atrahasis made his voice heard and spoke to the elders. I have called the elders, the senior men. Start an uprising in your own house. Let heralds proclaim. Let them make a loud noise in the land. Do not revere your gods. Do not pray to your goddesses. Search out the door to Namtara. Bring a baked loaf into his presence. May the flowering offering reach him. May be shamed by the presence and wipe away his hand. The elders listened to his speech. They built a temple for Namtara in the city. They made a loud noise in the land. They did not revere their god, did not pray to the goddess, but searched out the door of Namtara, brought a baked loaf into his presence. The flour offering reached him, and he was shamed by the presence and wiped away his hand. The Surapu disease left them. The gods went back to their regular offerings. 600 years, less than 600 passed. Tablet number 2. 600 years, less than 600 passed, and the country became too wide, the people too numerous. The country was as noisy as a bellowing bull. The god grew restless at their clamor. Elil had to listen to their noise. He addressed the great gods. The noise of mankind has become too much. I'm losing sleep over their racket. Cut off food supplies to the people. Let the vegetation be too scant for their hunger. Let Adad wipe away his rain. Below, let no flood water flow from the springs. Let wind go, let it strip the ground bare. Let clouds gather but not drop rain. Let the field yield a diminished harvest. Let Nisaba stop up her bosom. No happiness shall come to them. Because they have said, call the elders, the senior men, start an uprising in your house. Let the heralds proclaim it. Let them make a loud noise in the land. Bring a baked loaf into his presence. May the flour offering reach him. May be shamed by the presence and wipe away his hand. Then he will make a mist form in the morning, and in the night he will steal out and make dew drop. Deliver the field of its produce ninefold like a thief. They built a temple for Adad in the city, ordered heralds to proclaim and make a loud noise in the land. They did not revere their gods, did not pray to their goddess, but searched out the door of Adad, brought a baked loaf into his presence. The flour offering reached him. He was shamed by the presence and wiped away his hand. He made mist form in the morning, and in the night he stole out and made dewdrop, delivered the field of its produce ninefold, like a thief. The drought left them. The gods went back to their regular offerings. Not 3 epochs had passed, and the country became too wide, the people too numerous. The country was as noisy as a bellowing bull. The gods grew restless at their noise. Enlil addressed his assembly again, addressed the gods, his sons. The noise of mankind has become too much. Sleep cannot overtake me because of their racket. Command that Anu and Adad keep the air above the earth locked. Sin and Nergal keep the middle earth locked. As for the boat that bars the sea, Ea with his Lahamu creatures shall keep it locked. He ordered, and Anu and Adad kept the air above the earth locked. Sin and Nergal kept the middle earth locked. As for the boat that bars the sea, Ea with his Lahamu creatures kept it locked. Then the very wise man Atrahasis wept daily. He would carry a Masaku offering along the riverside pasture. Although the irrigation water was silent, halfway through the night, he offered a sacrifice. As sleep began to overtake him, he addressed the irrigation water. May the irrigation water take it. May the river carry it. May the gift be placed in front of Ea, my lord. May Ea see it and think of me. So may I see a dream in the night. When he had sent the message by water, he sat facing the river. He wept. The man wept facing the river as his plea went down to the Apsu. Then Ea heard his voice. He summoned his Lahamu creatures, addressed them. Rain did not fill the canals. Below, floodwater did not flow from the springs. Earth's womb did not give birth. No vegetation sprouted. The dark pasture land was bleached. The broad countryside filled up with alkali. In the first year, they ate old grain. In the second year, they depleted the storehouse. When the third year came, their looks were changed by starvation, their faces covered with scabs like mold. They barely stayed alive. Their faces looked sallow. They went out in public hunched, their well-set shoulders slouched, their upstanding barren bowed. They took a message from Atrahasis to the gods. In front of the assembly of the great gods they stood, and the orders of Atrahasis they repeated. 600 years, less than 600 years passed. The country became too wide. The people too restless. The country became too wise. The people too numerous. He grew restless at their noise. Sleep could not overtake him because of their racket. Elil addressed his assembly, addressed the gods his son. The noise of mankind has become too much. I have become restless at their noise. Sleep cannot overtake me because of their racket. Give the order that the Sarupu disease shall break out, and let Namtar put an end to their noise straight away. Let sickness, headache, Shurapu, Ashaku blow into them like a storm. They gave the order, and the Shurapu disease did break out. Namtar put an end to their noise straight away. Sickness, headache, Shurapu, Ashaku blew into them like a storm. The thoughtful man, Atrahasis, kept his ear open to his master Ea. He would speak with his god, and his god Ea would speak with him. Atrahasis made his voice heard and spoke, and said to Ea his master, O Lord, people are grumbling. Your sickness is consuming the country. O Lord, Ea, people are grumbling. Sickness from the gods is consuming the country. Since you created us, you ought to cut off sickness, headache, Shurapu, and Ashaku. Ea made his voice heard and spoke, said to Atrahasis, Order the heralds to proclaim, to make a loud noise in the land. Do not revere your gods. Do not pray to your goddesses. Elil organized his assembly, addressed the gods his sons. You are not to inflict disease on them again. Even though the people have not diminished, they are more than before. I have become restless at their noise. Sleep cannot overtake me because of their racket. Cut off food from the people. Let vegetation be too scant for their stomachs. Let Adad on high make his rain scarce. Let him block below and not raise flood water from the spring. Let the field decrease its yield. Let Nisaba turn away her breast. Let the dark fields become white. Let the broad countryside breed alkali. Let earth clamp down her womb so that no vegetation sprouts and no grain grows. Let Ashaku be inflicted on the people. Let the womb be too tight to let a baby out. They cut off food for the people. Vegetation had become too scant for their stomachs. Adad on high made his rain scarce, blocked below and did not raise floodwater from the springs. The field decreased its yield. Nisaba turned away her breast. The dark fields became white. The broad countryside bred alkali. Earth clamped down her womb. No vegetation sprouted. No grain grew. Ashaku was inflicted on the people. The womb was too tight to let a baby out. Ea kept guard over the boat that bars the sea, together with his Lahamu heroes. Above, Adad made his rain scarce, blocked below, and did not raise floodwater from the springs. The field decreased its yield. Nisaba turned away her breast. The dark fields became white. The broad countryside bred alkali. Earth clamped down her womb. No vegetation sprouted. No grain grew. Ashaku was inflicted on the people. The womb was too tight to let a baby out. When the second year arrived, they had depleted the storehouse. When the third year arrived, the people's looks were changed by starvation. When the fourth year arrived, their upstanding bearing bold, their well-set shoulders slouched. People went out in public, hunched over. When the fifth year arrived, a daughter would eye her mother coming in. A mother would not even open her door to her daughter. A daughter would watch the scales at the sale of her mother. A mother would watch the scales at the sale of her daughter. When the sixth year arrived, they served up a daughter for a meal, served up a son for food. Only one or two households were left. Their faces were covered with scabs like malt. People were barely able to stay alive, holding on to a thread of life. The thoughtful man Atrahasis kept his ear open to his master Ea. He would speak with his god, and his god Ea would speak with him. He left the door of his god and put his bed right beside the river, for even the canals were quite silent. When the second year arrived, they had depleted the storehouse. When the third year arrived, the people's looks were changed by starvation. When the fourth year arrived, their upstanding bearing bold, their well-set shoulders slouched. People went out in public hunched over. A daughter would eye her mother coming in. A mother would not even open her door to her daughter. A daughter would watch the scales at the sale of her mother. A mother would watch the scales at the sale of her daughter. When the sixth year arrived, they served up a daughter for a meal, served up a son for food. He, Enlil, was furious with the Ijiji. We, the great Annuna, all of us, agreed together on a plan. Anu and Adad were to guard above. I was to guard the earth below where Enki went. He was to undo the chain and set us free. He was to release produce for the people. He was to exercise control by holding the balance. Elil made his voice heard and spoke to the busier Nasku. Have the 50 Lahamu heroes fetched for me. Have them brought into my presence. The 50 Lahamu heroes were fetched for him. The warrior Elil addressed them. We, the great Annuna, all of us, agreed together on a plan. Anu and Adad were to guard above. I was to guard the earth below. Where you went, you were to undo the chain and set us free. You were to release produce for the people. You were to exercise control by holding the balance. Then the god grew anxious as he sat in the gods' assembly. Worry gnawed at him. Enki grew anxious as he sat in the gods' assembly. Worry gnawed at him. They were furious with each other, Enki and Elil. We, the great Annuna, all of us, agreed together on a plan. Anu and Adad were to guard above. I was to guard the earth below. Where you went, you were to undo the chain and set us free. You were to release produce for the people. You were to exercise control. You imposed your loads on man. You bestowed noise on mankind. You slaughtered together a god with his intelligence. And now you must create a flood. It is indeed your power that shall be used against your people. You agreed to the wrong plan. Have it reversed. Let us make far-sighted Enki swear an oath. Enki made his voice heard and spoke to his brother gods. Why should you make me swear an oath? Why should I use my own power against my people? The flood that you mentioned to me, what is it? I don't even know. Could I give birth to a flood? That is Elil's kind of work. Let Shalat and Hanish march ahead. Let Erakal pull out the mooring poles. Let Ninurta march. Let him make their wares overflow. The gods gave an explicit command. Elil performed a bad deed to the people. Atrahasis made his voice heard and spoke to his master. Indicate to me the meanings of the dream. Let me find its portent. Then Enki made his voice heard and spoke to his servant. You say, I shall find out in bed. Make sure you attend to the message I shall tell you. Wall, listen constantly to me. Read Hut, make sure you attend to all my words. Dismantle the house. Build a boat. Reject possessions and save living things. The boat that you build, make the roof like the Apsu, so that the sun cannot see inside it. Make upper decks and lower decks. The tackle must be very strong. The butamen strong to give strength. I shall make rain fall on you here, a wealth of birds and a hamper of fish. He opened the sand clock and filled it. He told him the sand needed for the flood was 7 nights' worth. Atrahasis received the message. He gathered the elders at his door. Atrahasis made his voice heard and spoke to the elders. My God is out of favor with your God. Enki and Elil have become angry with each other. They have driven me out of my house. Since I always stand in awe of Enki, he told me of this matter. I can no longer stay in. I can no longer set my foot on Elil's territory again. I must go down to the Apsu and stay with my God. This is what he told me. The carpenter brought his axe. The reed worker brought his stone. A child brought butamen. The poor fetched what was needed. Everything that was necessary, he selected and put on board. The birds that fly in the sky, wild animals of the open country he put on board. He invited his people to a feast, and he put his family on board. They were eating, they were drinking, but he went in and out, could not stay still or rest on his haunches. His heart was breaking, and he was vomiting bile. The face of the weather changed. Adad bellowed from the clouds. When he, Atrahasis, heard the bitumen was brought and he sealed his door. While he was closing up his door, Adad kept bellowing from the clouds. The winds were raging. As he went up and cut through the rope, he released the bolt. Apsu was tearing at the sky with his talons. He broke the bolt in the sky, and the flood came out. The Kashushu weapon went against the people like an army. No one could see anyone else. It could not be recognized in the catastrophe. The flood roared like a bull, like a wild ass screaming. The winds howled. The darkness was total. There was no sun. Then Anu went berserk. The gods, his sons before him. As for Nintu, the great mistress, her lips became encrusted with rime. The great gods, the Annuna, stayed parched and famished. The goddess watched and wept. Midwife of the gods, wise my me. However could I, in the assembly of the gods, have ordered such destruction with them? Elil was strong enough to give a wicked order. Like Teruru, he ought to have canceled that wicked order. I heard their cry leveled at me, against myself, against my person. Beyond my control, my offspring have become like white sheep. As for me, how am I to live in a house of bereavement? My noise has turned to silence. Could I go away up to the sky and live as in a cloister? What was Anu's intention as decision maker? It was his command that the gods his son obeyed. He who did not deliberate but sent the flood, he who gathered the people to catastrophe. Nintu was wailing. Would a true father have given birth to the rolling sea so that they could clog the river like dragonflies? They are washed up like a raft on a bank. They are washed up like a raft on a bank in an open country. I have seen and wept over them. Shall I ever finish weeping for them? She wept. She gave vent to her feelings. Nintu wept and fueled her passions. The gods wept with her for the country. She was sated with grief. She longed for beer in vain. Where she sat weeping, there the great gods sat too, but like sheep could only fill their windpipes with bleeding. Thirsty as they were, their lips discharged only the rime of famine. For 7 days and 7 nights, the torrent, storm, and flood came on. The gods smelt the fragrance, gathered like flies over the offering. When they had eaten the offering, Nintu got up and blamed them all. Whatever came over Anu who makes the decisions? Did Elil dare to come for this smoke offering? Those two who did not deliberate but sent the flood, gathered the people to catastrophe. You agreed to the destruction. Now their bright faces are dark forever. Then she went up to the big flies which Anu had made and declared before the gods, his grief is mine. My destiny goes with his. He must deliver me from evil and appease me. Let me go out in the morning. Let these flies be the lapis lazuli of my necklace, by which I may remember it daily, always and forever. The warrior Enlil spotted the boat and was furious with the Ijiji. We, the great Annuna, all of us agreed together on an oath. No form of life should have escaped. How did any man survive the catastrophe? Anu made his voice heard and spoke to the warrior Elil. Who but Enki would do this? He made sure that the reed had disclosed the order. Enki made his voice heard and spoke to the great gods. I did it. In defiance of you, I made sure that life was preserved. Exact your punishment from the sinner, and whoever contradicts your order, I have given vent to my feelings. Enlil made his voice heard and spoke to far-sighted Enki. Come, summon Ninurta, the womb goddess, confer with each other in the assembly. Enki made his voice heard and spoke to the womb goddess Ninurta. You are the womb goddess who decrees destinies to the people. In addition, let there be 1/3 of the people. Among the people, the woman who gives birth yet does not give birth successfully. Let there be the Pashitu demon among the people to snatch the baby from its mother's lap. Establish Ugbaptu, Intu, Esitu, and other women. They shall be taboo and thus control childbirth. Ha! We sent the flood, but a man survived the catastrophe. You are the counselor of the gods. On your orders, I created conflict. Let the Ijiji listen to this song in order to praise you, and let them record your greatness. I shall sing of the flood to all people. Listen about the great flood.